Okay, we're just going to finish up the last few types of epithelial tissue that I didn't get to in the last lecture because it was going a little too long for one lecture. So let's pick up where we left off. And just as a quick reminder, the last one I talked about was the stratified squamous, which was the tissue that's going to make up your epidermis, which is your skin, right? And it's made up of dead layer on the outside as you get farther away from that basement membrane. And it's got that keratin in there, which makes it tough. We also talked about simple cuboidal, which are going to be lining all of your ducts. So any gland, anything that secretes a substance is going to have that simple cuboidal around it, and that's going to allow for usually secretion, sometimes absorption. And then we also talked about simple squamous, which is going to be allowing for transport through a membrane. So for example, it allows for filtration and diffusion of gases into your lungs and out of your lungs and from your capillaries. And then lastly, we did simple columnar, which is going to be just a single layer of columnar cells, and that has the microvilli and the cilia to help it move food along and absorb increased surface area. And then it also has goblet cells, which produce mucus, which I don't think I said, but I put up on there. And we're going to talk more about those today. Okay, let's get rolling. So what we have next is we have our stratified columnar. And stratified columnar is going to be a double layer of cells, and it's actually made up of columnar cells overlaying cuboidal cells. So if you take a look here, it's kind of hard to see. There's a lot going on, but what you can see here is this is the basement membrane here. And you can always tell the basement membrane because it goes from being kind of a disorganized mess down here. And what this is that you're looking at down here is connective tissue. But then if you look and see where that definitive line is, that's the basement membrane, and then above it we have our epithelial. You can always tell epithelial tissue because it's organized, and it's a membrane. So it's going to be those tight junctions that we were talking about. The idea that they're going to be lined up next to each other and essentially forming a wall. Looks like a wall. So you can see there's one layer here, and you can see the nuclei are all lined up. So that shows you the one layer. And then above it, we have our second layer, which is going to be columnar. You can always tell cuboidal versus columnar because in columnar, the nucleus is not going to be central. So if you take a look here, that's the cell there, and the nucleus is in the middle. That's cuboidal. This is the cell here, and you can see the nucleus is down towards the bottom, and that's columnar. These are going to be mainly for protection. So it looks like padding, right? So it looks like a padding in like a football helmet, and that's essentially what it is. And you're going to find this in areas that need some protection, like in your pharynx, which is the back of your throat. There's a lot of soft tissue back there, and that thick layer of tissue is to protect your throat, your esophagus, and and also your trachea. And then also you're going to find this in the sclera of the eye. What is your sclera of your eye? It's the white of your eye. So if you look at the white of your eye, it looks kind of spongy, and it's because it's made up of this double layer. Now, one thing I do want to point out to you in this image, which is great, is what you're seeing over here, this little looks like a bunch of circles. Those are blood vessels. So that's what's called a vascular bundle. And your blood vessels kind of move throughout your tissues and they stay together in these bundles. And I just want to show you the distance to the epithelium. So there's no blood vessels in the epithelial tissue, but this blood here is able to diffuse out and get to that epithelial tissue. So because it's right here, that distance isn't too far, the epithelial tissue does not need its own blood supply. So in terms of function, protection, where it's located, you can find it in the male reproductive system, in the sclera of the eye, and the pharynx. There's not much else to say about it. It's there for protection, and that's what it looks like. Okay, the next one is the pseudostratified ciliated columnar, but we usually just call it pseudostratified. And pseudo means fake, so it looks stratified, but it's not. So let's talk a little bit more about this. Where you're going to find this is in your respiratory passages, not in your lungs. And a lot of people mix this up. Your simple squamous is the one that's going to be in your lungs. That's that thin layer that allows for diffusion. Your pseudostratified is going to be in the passageways that lead to your lungs. So the inside of your nose, the back of your throat, that's going to be pseudostratified columnar. And that is there for protection. And it has two features that make it unique. Cilia and goblet cells. Now, goblet cells produce mucus. So mucus is kind of gross, right? And what's mucus for? It traps particles. So then you sneeze and cough. And when you sneeze and cough, those particles that are trapped in that mucus are going to get expelled from your body. So if I breathe in, let's say, a virus or, the one that we're fighting right now, or a bacteria, or even just dust or something I'm allergic to. It's going to get trapped in the mucus, and then when I cough and sneeze, it's going to get rid of it just like that. The cilia is going to do a similar thing. The cilia is going to trap any unwanted particles, and then the mucus will pick it up, and then when you sneeze or cough, you get rid of it. This next image is a lot easier to see. So we're zoomed in here on the edge of the pseudostratified ciliated columnar. This is a goblet cell here. This thing that looks kind of like an open space, that is a goblet cell. So it would produce the mucus, and then the mucus would lay on top of that outer layer, the apical surface. And then also you can see the little hairs. Those little hairs are cilia. So they're going to be found in the pseudostratified ciliated columnar. And so if you're filling in that chart, the function is going to be protection. It's going to protect your respiratory passages from unwanted particles. Special features are going to be goblet cells with mucus and cilia to help trap any unwanted particles. And then in terms of location, it's going to be lining your respiratory passages, your nostrils, your nose, and then back into your throat. Okay, and the last one is transitional. And transitional tissue is very specialized to do one thing. It's specialized to stretch. We have several parts of our body which need to expand and stretch. One being our urinary bladder, right? Your bladder can expand and enlarge as you fill it, and then when you have to urinate, the muscle in the bladder will then squeeze it out. But you do need tissue that can stretch in order to make that function so it doesn't rip, right? That would be devastating if it ripped. So it's changes in response to stretching or tension. You can really see here when you look at this tissue, it looks a lot like stratified. And what you're seeing here is you're seeing these cells bunched up. It works a lot like the edge of your like sweatpants, that spandex at the edge of your sweatpants where it crinkles up, and then when you pull on it, it stretches. So these cells are kind of crinkled up, and then when they get pulled on, they'll lengthen and they'll stretch out, and that allows the bladder to stretch up. So you're going to find this in the urethra in a female, in a male. That's the tube leaving your bladder going out of the body, so it can expand as you urinate. The urinary bladder is going to be, obviously, that's your bladder. And you have larger cells at the surface and then smaller cells as you go deeper. So this is going to be stratified, but they just call it transitional, and it's very specific to stretching. And that's it.